Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by John Paul Mason and Kevin Graham. Just last minute, but listen, it's tremendous to have you both. I'm delighted actually to have you on, JP, today, because I want to get a sense of how the trip went over to Feyenoord off the park. Obviously, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what happened on the park. We've been talking about it since Tuesday night. There's a lot to talk about, actually. So Rotterdam, you've done a lot of away days. You've done a lot of touring with your job in music. How does it rate?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I was in Rotterdam for 23 hours. So, I mean, I don't really know if I'm qualified to talk about how good a city it is. But it seemed, from what I saw of it, it seemed pretty cool. The journey there was pretty hellish. I got a notification on Monday to say that my train has become a bus to London, which wasn't the best start. Whenever you see that bus replacement, you're just like, oh no. So it was a bus to Carlisle, and then a train for Carlisle to London. I did meet a nice guy on the bus to Carlisle, though, a guy, Johnny, from, originally from Leeds, lives in Glasgow. His dad became a Celtic fan because he met his mum. His mum's from Black Hill. She's a massive Celtic fan. Dad, right. English guy from Leeds, kind of like Man United, which seems very, very similar to me. Kind of like Man United, but wasn't ever like a proper supporter. And because of his, marriage to Johnny's mum, just became full on Celtic. Mm-hmm. And Johnny was like, I'm telling you, beyond maybe Paul the Tin, there's not a bigger Celtic fan you'll find than my dad. He started the CSC. He runs the Leeds CSC and from the Irish Centre in Leeds. So,
right. Aye. I've heard of this. Now, the thing is, here you talk about ultra like mega teams, and what brought it home back home to me, I think, was I've mentioned this a couple of times. A few months ago, I was at a wedding back in the, it was one of the village weddings, and I met a lot of the guys that I hadn't seen for ages, JP, guys that had gone to the games with in the early 90s, for example, where it was two men in a dug in the bus and all this kind of stuff, and it was great catching up with them. People like Tony Murphy and Jay Cusick and Kenny Wilson and all these guys for the villages who have been going to Celtic games week in, week out for decades. But nobody beyond the villages know who they are. But they're as big Celtic fans as you'll ever meet. Kevin, you know guys like that as well.
I met a few of them. Yeah. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, get to Rotterdam eventually on the Eurostar on Tuesday, check into a hotel, and then really didn't have that much time to sort of get acclimatised, and then was right out to the ground, and then sitting behind three guys. I saw one of them show the other a picture of him with the Henrik Larsson mural. It was not a mural, it's like a sticker that's on the concourse of the inside of the Decoit. And I was like, oh, I got one of them as well. And he turned round, and then his mate turned round and went, "You'll know Kev Graham." And I was like, what's going on here? And then they proceeded to tell me about how they knew Kev and like the Paul McStay and Bannockburn, and
there you go.
It was really great to meet those guys. So it was Brian, Tommy, Leo, and Walter.
I know Leo.
Good guys.
There you go.
Guys. They were staying on a warship. Would you believe?
Planes, trains, and automobiles, the things that Celtic fans do to get to see the team. No, I love to hear about your travails, because I mean, 23-hour kind of round trip to see a game of football and all that. JP, I was watching.
It's nuts. Let's face it.
I know it is. The dedication is incredible.
The guys that JP met, Tommy and all the guys from the Paul McStay St Ninians bus. There was only two Celtic buses bussed it. It was for Cundurra and one for St Ninians, Stirling. And the Paul McStay bus arrived home at 5:30 this morning from leaving Rotterdam on Tuesday night. They got delayed at Calais, and the guy that JP was talking about there, Tommy, he's at his work now. He arrived at 5 o'clock this morning and went in for a shower, and he's away working.
Honestly, honestly,
That
I
is
take my hat
amazing,
off to
man.
all these people that do that. I remember we obviously covered the game afterwards, and there was the fan footage, the shots, sorry, and you're looking at some of these guys thinking they'll be at their work in a matter of hours. They are going to go home from Rotterdam, get ready, no sleep, go to their work. It's incredible. But you mentioned something, and I've seen some of the images that you posted on your socials now, JP, with the beautiful murals and the artwork. This is the kind of thing I'm banging on about every Monday after doing a Wander Around Paradise. I'd love to see more of that kind of thing around about Celtic Park as well, you know, looking through our history and at legends and icons and having beautiful murals up on the walls.
The story about that mural is, like, I think it was Celtic Bars on Twitter posted about or retweeted about the Wim Jansen mural in the Oude Norden area of Rotterdam, and I just thought, you know, if I've got time when I'm there, I'm going to go and try and see that because it's a really nice thing. But I didn't know the background of it until I was on my way there and I started reading why it came about. And basically, there was that street in Rotterdam. There was a mural of a guy called Koen Mullen. I hope I'm not butchering the surname, but he was one of Wim Jansen's teammates in the 70 final,
right?
And they were good friends. And Wim Jansen's daughter lived just behind that mural. And when Wim Jansen would come to visit his daughter, he would always park his car deliberately next to that mural of his pal. So the artist that did the Wim Jansen mural was like, that's the place I need to do the Jansen mural. So it's they're facing each other in that street. It's just really,
that's amazing.
Really special thing, I think, you know. And it was a half-hour walk from where I was, but I was like, no, I'm definitely going, and it was really cool to see it. So
that's incredible. And you know, the illustrious nature of our history, the colourful nature of our history, I just think it's something we need to do. I walk around the stadium every Monday and I see the breeze blocks, and I'm just thinking, let's get creative, you know, on the outside of the stadium. Let's spend a couple of that quid that's lying in the bank. We're going to come back to that. But the last thing, you mentioned Blackhill. Big shout out to everybody from Blackhill who's watching A Celtic State of Mind, particularly our friend Jim Simonetti, who has been involved with Acsom for a long, long time. Jungle Lion brings up, before we get to Feyenoord, Recruitment, Livingston and everything else, Jungle Lion, great to see Paul Byrne playing in the St. Rochs game. All these players you're getting have scored against them. I hadn't noticed that. That wasn't a prerequisite, but you're right. And I'm going to say it. It's sold out. The game is completely sold out. It's St. Roch's centenary. It's 3 years delayed due to the pandemic and everything else. And we're pulling together a team of ex-Celts to play against St. Roch's, and it's getting very competitive. And I was just saying to JP before we came live, I have a message on my phone from what can only be described as a modern-day Celtic icon saying that he'll play, and then within 60 seconds saying, oh, bleep, I've double booked. I can't. I'm playing in David Gray's testimonial that day. Scott Brown. We were that away for Evan Bruni playing for the Celtic Select. And honestly, that would have been unbelievable, Kevin Graham. The meltdown, Kev, from the Feyenoord game. We've seen a bit of meltdown from fans. We've seen a wee bit, you know, as you would expect in the media, a lot of that sensationalised. Yeah, I get the disappointment. Meltdown, though. What's your thoughts on it, Kev?
Look, I've kind of made my peace that we're not going to show the ambition that we want to show in Europe until we leave Scottish football. I think it's been proved this week by the comments of the chairman and also some of Brendan's comments after the games as well. So I went into Tuesday's night's game just wanting to compete and let's see where it goes. Let's see where it takes us. And I thought that we'd done that for 46 minutes.
Just 46? Just 46?
I think we had a wee bit of a tail off in the first 15 minutes of the second half. Then you get the two sending offs, and that's it, done. The game's there. The game's done as a contest. Then you're sitting there going, I hope this doesn't get any worse. I hope this is not a 4, 5, 6 thing way. But we're always going to, any time that we go into this competition, we're always asking boys to do men's jobs. That's all what always seems. Always seem to be asking inexperienced guys to come in and do this and that. But it's the way our business model is. Our business model is not going to change. So, I mean, we've got all that money in the bank, and it's like a row of caravans perched on like a cliff edge, right? And the cliffs eroding with nature, and we've got the biggest caravan and the biggest and the best caravan on that cliff edge, and it's still going to fall into the sea because that's what nature's going to dictate. It's a waste of time having that turnover money in Scotland unless you're going to spend it on infrastructure, because you can't spend it on transfers because there's only going to be a certain level of player come to Scottish football, and that next level of player is not going to come to Scottish football. So that's where you're hoping that your manager gets a game plan right and the boys become men on the night. And that's all we can hope for, really.
Coming to Scottish football, I'm going to pick up on that point, Kev, right? So my kind of argument, and we're going to dig a wee bit deeper into this because obviously there's going to be people agreeing and disagreeing. My argument is that we shouldn't be like backfilling a squad full of players now. We now have the two differentiations that Celtic refer to: players you can develop against players that can make an immediate impact. You can't backfill a squad through, transfer window after transfer window, because it's not just been this season, with guys who you hope to develop either for the benefit of the football club or the benefit of the balance sheet. And that's what we've done. Now, there are players who, with the carrot of the Champions League, will consider coming to Celtic, and we've proved it. And I think that you're never going to go to the very top level when it comes to recruitment, but you can definitely buy a player who's going to make more of an immediate impact than the ones that, in particular, we've signed in this transfer window that's just closed. But I mean, the recruitment concerns, as I've said in the tagline, it goes beyond this season, JP. I was saying to you earlier on today, you look at that starting lineup on Tuesday night, and if we're building, and we do have a strategy, because we keep hearing about a strategy, if we're building, why then is there only one player in the starting 11 on Tuesday night that came from last season's recruitment? Because that sounds like last season's recruitment has been a flop to me. And I know people might say, but we got Jota and Carter Vickers. Yeah, but that was an extension of the season before's recruitment. That was part of the deal that obviously we then had an option to try and buy them at the end of the season, and that's gone into season number 2. But I'm talking guys like Haksabanovic, Bernabe, Siegrist, Kobayashi, all flops. And the one guy that's kind of come through is Alistair Johnston. So this extends beyond this season, doesn't it, this issue?
Well, it shows you how good season 1 under Andrew Postecoglou's recruitment was, because it allowed it to roll on into season 2, and those players had acclimatised, become used to the demands of the club, found their feet in the country, and then were able to really showcase what they could do. All of the players that came in season 1 that did well in season 1 did amazing in season 2, but the players that came in season 2 didn't do as well as the players that came in season 1, in their season 1, quote unquote. Therefore, their season 2 is just, to borrow Kev's analogy, is falling off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
But Bernabe, we can argue about him for as long as we want, but the ultimate thing is we paid $4 million for Bernabe, and that guy should be doing what Alistair Johnston's doing.
Yeah,
it should be a first team, at least a guy who's seriously in the argument to displace Greg Taylor. Like, it shouldn't be a guy that's omitted from the Champions League squad, whether it's for the reasons that we might think it is in terms of homegrown player quotas or whatever. But a guy you've paid £4 million for in a position where we're not exactly flush, that guy should be one of the first names in there, surely. But he's not, because he's not done the business, and that's a mixture of all things. But that's one of the reasons. That's one of the areas where, or the examples where our recruitment has fallen short. We've recruited a young guy from a completely different part of the world, who I don't know what he's, in terms of what they'd scouted him to be before he came as out with being a football player. Like, what had they scouted him? His temperament, his mentality, all that sort of stuff. That should have been looked at, because Alistair Johnston, they've obviously looked through off the park. They've just looked through his history as a player and how he's developed, and been like, right, he'll adapt to this environment. He will integrate well with the team that's here, and he's a good footballer, and he's an international. So it's really frustrating as a Celtic fan that they can get one thing so right and the other so wrong. On the other side of each or the other side of the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then that's the nature of the gamble. That's the nature of the market that we're in. But that we want that's the nature of the market that we choose to shop in. If you get what I mean, you get a success with Alistair Johnson, you get a failure with Bernabei. Last season's recruitment has been proved to be dodgy. So then you go into this Champions League group with basically a load of injuries. Palmer making his debut, but out with the Scales and Lagerbielke and Palmer and Alistair Johnson, who I come to actually think about it. That was our first team. Alistair Johnson's our first team as well. That was our first team squad that have had European experience before. And they played all right for 46 minutes, but the same old failings are still there. They didn't seem to learn about anything. And I thought Alistair Johnson was fantastic. I thought Scales was fantastic. I thought Lagerbielke was doing all right, but he kind of spooked himself with getting booked in the first half, and that was always going to happen. But you've got guys there that have played European football before. I played that level of football for years last season and the season before, and the Europa League before that as well. And they didn't seem to learn. They're not good enough, and we need to move on. Everybody in that squad is up for grabs. If we want to progress, everybody should be looking over their shoulder.
But three or four elements of the team not being good enough affects the whole team. I wouldn't say the whole team isn't good enough. I think that had we strengthened the way that we'd strengthened with the likes of Carter Vickers and Jota, and we'd done that again with 2 or 3 players at that level, that level of player, you're going to have a better team.
What I would argue there, you look at the midfield. Surely Callum McGregor, Rio Hatate and Matt O'Reilly are going to ken this is going to be up in pace and we're going to need to be quicker on the ball rather than dallying on it, and next thing you ken the ball's getting took off them.
I think the biggest issue...
Surely they know that by now. Surely they know it's going to be far...
issue with that though, Kev, was Hatate, it's his first start after injury. So there's elements of that team that under normal circumstances, those 3 players should know the role at that level in Champions League football. But one of them wasn't 100% match fit, which is why he came off. When you go into the defence, I agree. Johnson and Scales were 2 of our best performers. But let's be honest, Scales, at the beginning of the season, or when everybody's fit, isn't playing this game. Scales is not playing on Tuesday night when everybody's fit. And that Palmer playing his first start for Celtic, his first game in the Champions League, that's bad planning, that's bad recruitment. We should have a player...
It's gone into a game with too many gambles.
Too many gambles,
100%. Far too many gambles.
Hatate was a gamble. I mean, obviously Hatate's a really good player, right? And he clearly wasn't fit for that match.
Why ask him to play the high press, by the way, JP? I found that really strange.
There was such a clamour for him to play. Like, no, but if Turnbull had been announced in that starting lineup on Tuesday, there would have been a complete and utter meltdown in the comments on all the posts announcing that team. You know it. 90% of people would have been like, FFS Turnbull, like just give them the goals, and now all of that. You know that's what it would have been like, because people have seemed to be so anti David Turnbull. It's unbelievable how. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't want Rio Hatate to play, because obviously I know what he can do. However, whatever's going on, and a combination of whatever's going on in Rio Hatate's head, and the fact that he's only played, half an hour of football, if that, 20 minutes on Saturday when we're 1-0 up at home to Dundee, is hardly the most testing environment he's ever going to be in. And 10 minutes in a second half appearance against Aberdeen when he gets subbed off for an injury. So there's a part of me that thinks, did Brendan Rodgers maybe bow to the pressure of the support? Surely not. He's not that type of person. But it did seem to me that I do wonder, and I'm not saying that I think that Turnbull should start over Hatate if Hatate's fit. But I do wonder, in one of your parallel universes, Kev, if Turnbull starts that game on Tuesday night, how does that game go? Because Turnbull, as Alan Morrison said, Turnbull allowed McGregor and O'Reilly to play the way they did at Ibrox because of his work rate. There wasn't work rate from Rio Hatate on Tuesday.
I'm sorry to jump in, JP, but you have a look at the stats and it's something I rarely do. And Alan Morrison might come in and kick my arse for actually taking his job here. Hatate made no defensive contribution whatsoever on the night. No defensive contribution on the night.
Well, see the thing, Kev, right? That's maybe why he did play him high up the pitch, by the way. I found it strange because it was going to require a really high tempo performance, and you thought to yourself, he's not got the minutes in his legs to do that. But that's maybe why he did it, Kev. If that was the stats that came out of it, because that obviously is not good enough from a defensive perspective. But earlier on, Kev, you said we're not good enough. But what I would say in defence of that, if I'm going to try and be the devil's advocate here, pot one team away from home, you're playing a central defensive partnership for all intents and purposes of either your third, fourth or fifth choice centre-halves when everybody's fit. And we're handing out 4 Champions League debuts now. Some of them were
Champions
forced.
League debuts were Feyenoord handing it.
I never checked. Can you tell me?
All of them.
I never looked.
But
But
all of them.
right,
Well,
okay.
I don't know, I'm just guessing.
But maybe they've got a better calibre of player. What I'm trying to say here is, Kev, you go to a game like that and we play with Carter Vickers and Noroski, who are probably your first and second pick if everybody's fit, or Phillips when everybody's fit, and you're playing with someone on the right-hand side like Abada, and we come away from the game without 2 red cards and we get beat 2-0, I'm going to take your argument. But I think there's extenuating circumstances about Tuesday night. I really do. I don't think it's just a case of we're not good enough. We've got to look at the positive aspect to going there and coming away with a result that, by the way, could become a pivotal result, that it's no 3 or 4 or 5 come the end of the group stage, because it could be that tight. So I think you've got to look at the positives as well as.
I am looking at the positives in certain aspects, because I didn't expect to get a result. So I have to look at the positives at certain aspects. But what really gets me time and time again is the players go like that. Oh, that was a surprise that they played at that intense level. They're going, well, what do we actually do? I mean, we can't play that test level against Dundee because Dundee will only do it. So do we not do it in training? Why does it come as a surprise to these boys that they're going to need to step up?
Was it the intensity? Was it the intensity that lost us?
You
or
could
was
see
it losing
Feyenoord,
2 players?
You could see that Feyenoord were far sharper even in the first half in mind and physically when they were closing things down. And when we were trying to play the ball out for the back, we kept on losing it because we were panicking. And I found it interesting that Rodgers says that after the game. He says we sometimes we didn't actually keep calm and let the game develop. We tried to rush the game and force the game. And you saw it a couple of times in the final third when we did get into the final third, which we did create a number of half chances in the final third, and the final ball was wrong. Seemed a bit rushed, seemed a bit panicked. But when I was listening to Rodgers after the game, I think he was having a go at it. I really do. He's going like that. Sometimes you need to just take a breath and let the game develop rather than try to flip the ball and rather try and do this and that. I really did think he was having a go at Tati and some of the other guys on the pitch as well for trying to play the ball quick. I still don't think they've still got out of Ange ball mode where chaos ruled.
Ball retention is key, Kevin, and that defensive stat you said about Hatate, you know, I'm not going to call him an empty jersey. I'm not going to do any of these things. I was surprised that he was picked, but I take what JP says. Had he not been picked, there'd have been a massive clamour for him to be in the starting 11. There's no doubt about it. But there's a point I want to pick up on that you made, Kevin. It was about we're choosing to shop in various different markets. We are choosing because when it comes to Burnaby, right, we've gone into the realms of buying our first ever Argentinian player. And it's a massive transfer fee for a club like Celtic. I mean, 4 million is the price that we're paying for the likes of 4 and a wee bit million for Starfelt and Kyogo and the Rochs. So it's a fairly big investment for a club like Celtic, right, on one player. It really is. It's moving from the bracketed player that's your 1.5 to 2.5, and it's taken up to that 4 to 6 million. So big signing. It's not worked out. It's not going to work out. I mean, the evidence would suggest it's not going to work out. It's not an opinion-based thing on Burnaby. What would have happened though if we had bought Josh Doig? What would have happened? What would have been the reaction to that? This is a player that has gone to Italian football, right? And he's gone there and he's absolutely, like a lot of the young Scottish players that have gone to Italy, he's excelled to the point where there's loads of interest in him bigger clubs. But what would have happened if we had signed him? Would it have satisfied what happens in a transfer window, JP, where everybody just wants signings? Would that have satisfied us as football fans? But actually, it would have been a safer bet than Alexandro Burnaby. But I don't think it would have been well received. So it's about also thinking of a strategy. I think a bigger risk is Burnaby coming from Argentinian football.
100%. I think there'll be people within. Well, there's always going to be people within the support that aren't happy with whatever happens. It's the way it goes. I personally have always been a fan of us signing Scottish players who have been scouted properly and want to play for Celtic. I mean, somebody put in a comment somewhere or wherever in the last few days, Strachan's success was signing homegrown players, like bringing in guys like Barry Robson and playing a Scottish core. That is actually, it's not what you want to see across the whole team. I mean, it would be ideal if that could happen, but it's not going to happen realistically. But an element of Scottish players in there is always good, and I don't think we should ever be snooty about signing players. I do think that part of the reason that Turnbull doesn't get a fair crack of the whip is because we signed them from Motherwell. Like it's almost like, I don't know. Maybe people would disagree with that. I don't know. People would maybe say differently, but I certainly, if it was coming down to a choice between signing a really, really promising Scottish talent versus spending big on somebody that's never set foot in this country before, I don't know. I think I would go with the homegrown talent, just because. Why would you? I mean, it would only become the case if Hibs were really difficult to deal with and they asked for crazy money because they were selling a player to Celtic. I don't know what the relations are like between Hibs and Celtic for players, given that the last player I think we attempted to sign from them was John McGinn, and I don't really know what the end game of that negotiation was.
No. See the thing, the reason I bring it up, I'm going to go back to the point Kev made about the 9 debutants as well, because it's about progression and how Feyenoord are progressing, whereas I don't think we're standing still. Because last season, Kev, I think it would have been 9. The answer would have been 9 if you asked me about Celtic's Champions League debutants. But what happens the following season is you don't progress. You look at Feyenoord, they got into the Conference League final. Now, a lot of people turn their nose up at Conference League, and they got beat from Roma, who had knocked out Brendan Rodgers' Leicester in the semi. How have they progressed? Well, you've seen it on Tuesday night, how they've progressed. They've gone on to win the Dutch League. And they're continuing to progress.
In between that final, they had a quarter final of the Europa League last year, where they got beat off Roma as well. Then now they've progressed into the Champions League.
So you can see where they're going. The frustration is with Celtic last season, 9 debutants and we didn't win a game in the Champions League. So you're hoping to progress. You look at it this season, and albeit we do have 4, one of whom I was surprised was picked in Palma. I thought it was a strange decision, but that wasn't after the event. That was in the pre-match when we were talking about the game. But where's the progression is what I'm trying to say. But 2-0 could have been a hell of a lot worse on Tuesday night under the circumstances. But the point I was making about the Scottish players, I don't want anybody to get me wrong and think, we need to sign Scottish players to do well in Europe, because I think there's arguments for and against it. But Lawrence made a good point the other day, JP, and it was the fact that we're kind of running out of homegrown players when it comes to the squad. And Turnbull might be out the door at the end of this season as well. We're talking about, maybe replacing Taylor. Who do you replace him with? Another player that's not classed as a homegrown player. So, I do think that if there is a talented Scottish player, we really need to start looking at that market, as well as the kind of high risk model of bringing in Kwon from the South Korean second division, or bringing in an Argentinian player who's, as you say, never sets foot on Scottish soil. There is a risk in that, but we're going to have to, I think, manage it a wee bit better than we have done already. I'm going to bring this up because Danielle is still tuning in, even though she's in sunny Gran Canaria. which is fantastic, Danielle. I hope you're enjoying the show a wee bit more than you enjoyed the game on Tuesday night. And we've also got, let's not get delusional here, blah, blah, blah. The board have spent millions in transfer fees over the last 2 years. It's not just about spending money, is it, Kev? It's not about spending money. We could list 20 or 30 players without even looking back through the records who haven't worked out, who have cost us a lot of money. It's not just about spending money, is it?
No, it's not just about spending money. We've got the money in infrastructure. We've got money to spend on infrastructure, right? It shouldn't be all about spending on players and stuff like that, right? We should be going like that to Lennoxtown. Right? What the hell needs done there to actually keep players here? What needs done there? What do we need today in data, science, the whole kit and caboodle, where we can actually replicate what the elite Champions League clubs have actually got, because we have got the money to actually do that. Then you're looking at performance level actually going up, which shouldn't actually give a monkeys about the opposition that you're actually playing, even though if you look at PSG, sometimes that doesn't work. But we've got the money there to actually improve everything. And do we want to do it? Do we want to make sure we've got the best sports science department in Britain, or up there with the best in Britain?
Have we even got the best in Scotland at the moment, do you think, Kev?
I don't know. Again.
You know, because I think that we as football fans, we look at signings and think that's data-driven. That must be data-driven. Why would we spend 5 million on a Yeti? No, it wasn't, because the two players that are side by side there are Ivan Toney and a Yeti. We've gone for a Yeti. Now, even on the base stats, you know that was the wrong move.
I mean, you ken what I'm going to be like in that St. Rochs dressing room. I'm your sports scientist, and my science has gone like that. Are you
going to wear one of the white jackets?
I'm going to wear one of the white coats, and I'm going to walk up and go like that to Big John Yogi Hughes. You look fit, you're playing. That's my sports science. You weren't out last night, you're playing.
Frank McGarvey used to do that, I remember. He used to grab you by the cheeks, JP, and says, you've put on weight, you're on the bench. Nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with a lack of ability.
But it was your arse cheeks he was grabbing.
Well, rest in peace, Frank McGarvey. I love my time with Frankie boy. No, you're right. But no, I'm asking the question. I don't know the answer to that, Kev. Are we even the best in Scottish football at a lot of these things? Because we should be far and away the best in Scottish football when it comes to data analysis, sports science, this type of thing. We absolutely should be.
Everything new is, you hear it all the time, and it sounds almost like a cliche, like it's small percentages. Well, unfortunately, we're playing Dundee and Livingston. We're not playing teams of calibre that like Feyenoord, Lazio, or Atletico Madrid are going to play, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we get that extra so it's not a surprise that these boys can run faster or bigger and stronger than us? How can we actually get our players up to that? Because they're not going to get it in the league that they're playing it. So they've got to get it in the complex. Yep. They've got to actually get that ambition in the actual club and get that conditioning in the club. And how do you do that? Well, you can't spend £16 million on a transfer fee because the guy's not likely to come here, and you can't pay him 60 grand a week. So you get this boy into the club, and it's a bit like a picture at Rocky 4. I ken he's like a film hang way. Like, I ken Rocky ended up beating Dolph Lundgren and all that when he was just lifting logs and stuff like that. But you look at Dolph Lundgren's training camp, it was all top notch and all of that. And Rocky was just running up mountains and in the snow and stuff like that. That's what we should be like, the Russians in that.
All right. I wasn't sure if you wanted us to be Rocky.
We're going down a mental wormhole here. Kev just said he wants us to be like the Russians. I mean, and
Rocky 4.
Hopefully the clips that and puts it out there.
And Rocky 4.
But Rocky beat him. Anyway,
and that's because it was American fairy tale. He wouldn't have bet him in real life. The Dolph Lundgren would have knocked seven bells in the first round.
It happens though.
See, on the guy that commented there, or girl, I didn't get the name, but they said about spending money. You only need to look. Unfortunately, you'll need to look at Manchester United and how much money they've completely hosed on the wrong fit of player for 10 years now. In the 10 years since Sir Alex Ferguson left Old Trafford, the amount of money they've spent it pains me to say it, but they've spent, I think they've spent the most money in England. Like, their transfer fees have been outrageous, and they've spent badly. We've got plenty of examples of where we've spent well, but we've got plenty of examples of where we've spent badly as well. And it isn't always all about money. It's about identifying the right type of person. As Ange Postecoglou used to say all the time, I want to get the right type of person in, and I don't think we've done that in some cases.
I want to use Jota as an example, right? Because a lot of the comments that come in say we've not replaced Jota. I agree with that, but we can't. And it's going back to what Kev said. Even though it was a Rocky IV analogy, and I welcome Rocky IV analogies, you can bring a player in, develop and condition them into what Jota became. The guy we brought in was a Benfica reserve player. But obviously there was data available. The character was there, JP. That was very, very important. I don't know who identified Jota. Was Ange Postecoglou keeping an eye on the Portuguese reserve league? I don't think so, right? I don't think it was him. I think it was the same recruitment team who have done the business this time round. So you bring in a player like Jota, like you say again, JP, your first season recruitment benefited your second because that loan turned into a permanent, and we got him for 66.5 million. By the time he leaves Celtic a year after he permanently signs, he's a £25 million player. So there's your template. Let's do it again. Now, I'm not writing off Palma or Tellio, who I've not even seen playing for Celtic, or Bernardo, or any of the guys that have come in. I'm not writing them off because they might go through that same trajectory. It's unlikely because it's not going to happen every time. But that's the type of, for me, that's the blueprint. Do what you've done with Jota.
Remember where Matt O'Reilly came from? He was playing for MK Dons. And now he's a guy that everybody that's naming their Celtic team to start against Feyenoord in the opening night of the Champions League, Matt O'Reilly's one of the first names down in that team sheet.
Undoubtedly.
You know what I mean?
Undoubtedly. Yeah, he did. Well, I thought Big Yogi made a great point yesterday about the fact that he had to put in a good shift, Kev, but you've obviously added to that with your Hatate stats. O'Reilly looked dead on his feet by the time he came off, but John mentioned, and he was absolutely right in what he said, no wonder, because he was doing the work of two men.
He didn't have Turnbull doing the work.
I know.
I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of cheerleader for David Turnbull, but it really annoys me the amount of stick that guy gets. It's unbelievable how jumped on he is by the support. It's mental. Like,
were you surprised that Home came on even more so than Hatate starting? Were you surprised that Turnbull didn't come on?
Yeah, I was. I like Home and I like what I've seen of him, but that tackle, I didn't see anything of the game until this morning, and I watched a wee 5-minute clip of highlights. So all I had for the last 24 or 48 hours was just chatter I'd seen online, things I'd heard from people after the game, and people's opinions on the penalty incident, people's opinions on the goal, the first goal, and people's opinions on that tackle. The tackle was daft to do that 10 minutes into your Champions League debut. But when you see social media posts from him like "bitch, stay down, be humble" or something like, or whatever it was, whatever song lyric it was, he quoted and then deleted. You do question that guy's temperament at this moment in time to play in a Champions League game if he's like showing off about winning against Aberdeen at Pittodrie. I don't like that. I said it at the time, and you'd like to think someone would be a bit more switched on coming on like that. I think Lagerbielke was done for the penalty. That for me is up there with the Juventus penalty in Turin. That guy bought that.
Who was it? Amoroso was
Amoroso.
Yeah.
I just don't think that there's plenty of people other than me, more qualified than me, players that have played the game. Assistant manager Marvin Bartley said on Super Scoreboard last night, no way that's a penalty. Neil Lennon, no penalty. I mean, obviously you could say Neil Lennon's going to be biased, but I think Neil Lennon, be honest, he was honest about the Home tackle. The goal, they've been really cute and they've worked on that in training. If you watch it, the guy runs across Kyogo and puts Kyogo off, and that's what leads to the gap, I think. Anyway, somebody said that to me after, and now that I've seen it, I see what he's done. It's obviously been worked on in training, and then I'm sure there's going to be loads of people now blaming Joe Hart.
But then you say work on training. That's a wee percentage more. Work on it in training today, something like that. No, we've since found out that Joe Hart changed the line up of the wall on the pitch. Kyogo wasn't meant to be in the wall.
Right.
because that was no how. So nobody really kens why he done that. It must have been something to do with an earlier free kick, and he's seen something, and he's went, I'm going to set the ball up differently. But you talk about that wee percentage, working on free kicks, working on set plays and stuff like that. I remember laughing at Liverpool. I've got a throwing coach. I remember laughing at like Aston Villa with the guy that used to be the Hibs assistant.
That's him.
Austin McCann.
Yeah.
By the way,
he's a set play coach. That's all he does. That's the type of thing we should have. We should have that.
I watched him in the Scotland game against England, right? Because obviously he's in the Scotland coaching staff, and he was out in the what do you call it? The managerial area.
Technical area.
He was out in the technical area screaming at players every time there was a corner or any time there was a set play. He was screaming, reminding them of their instructions and who to go on. Obviously, it doesn't always work because you're up against top talent and what England had to offer. But it was pretty impressive to see somebody that was so switched on. He's not a guy just sitting there, arms folded, not involved in the game.
He's not trying to be a polymath. He's not the assistant manager trying to do everything. He will only be watching set plays.
Yeah, 100%.
He will only be watching their set plays. He will be doing one thing. And that is something that we maybe have to look at.
It's a fine margins, Kev, isn't it? It's a fine
margins.
Remember,
everybody thought John Kennedy was the defensive coach.
By the way, I'm going to
that would have worked.
I'm going to mention it was relevant, but and I don't for once, please, people that are watching this, don't go check him saying who he met and blah blah blah, because I can't be arsed for that, right? But I happened to meet Gavin Strachan at a gig, right? It was at a James gig at the Armadillo a couple of months ago. And it was the day after. You what?
No surprise that it was at a James gig.
Well, obviously, like father, like son. But it was the day after we'd beaten them in the semi-final, and I said to him, I was like, "What, that mistake? I can't believe that they switched off." And he said that's just one of the many. That's the one we punished. So his job is sitting making notes on where Rangers, where any player makes a mistake, so that they can capitalise on things like that. So that's, you talk about a person having one job. I'm sure he's got more than that, but it was interesting. I'd never thought of that before, to think of him just sitting there taking notes, going, "Oh, he does that. Oh, he does that. Oh, he does that. Home in. And that's where you target weaknesses. Now, that might be completely obvious to many people watching. It wasn't to me until I had that conversation.
No, but it's the fine margins, so JP, that Kevin's talking about, and having that hub, Kev, where you're developing that within there. And if it means that you've got somebody who's going to give you that advantage, however small that advantage is, I think that is the infrastructure you're talking about. That's the investment you're talking about, as well as the recruitment, because it's easy to just say, recruitment's not good enough, but it's multifaceted. Now, I've got to say, I spoke about Jota, cautionary tale. Try to terminate his contract, try to get all his wages. It's like everybody swarms to the big money of the Saudi Pro League. It's maybe not everything it's made out to be. I was looking at the attendances in relation to the St. Rochs game that Jungle Lion mentioned earlier on. St. Rochs, James McGrory Park's going to have a higher attendance at the game on the 15th of October than 2 of the Saudi Pro League games had at the weekend there. They're regularly getting less than 1,000 people at their games. So big shout out to St. Rochs for the sterling efforts there, and also Jota, just come home, get it tore up and come back for the last 5 Champions League games. I'm going to ask you this question. I'll come back to the red cards. I've not heard from you, Kev, about the red cards, right? Obviously, differing views on it. Brendan Rodgers spoke about both of them after the game. He spoke about home. He kind of caveated that by saying, great wee player, etc., etc. However, that nobody can argue that was a bad talent. In fact, it was there was 2 parts of it. He connected with the guy's shin and just under his knee. Second part looked worse. But the first one, Lagerbielke's more up for debate, more up for discussion, Kev. And Brendan Rodgers said that he shouldn't have been in the fight. He should have just left it. Hart had it covered. That was the inexperience that frustrated Rodgers. What's your take on both red cards, Kev?
The argument with Holmes, the argument whatsoever. It's on a slippy pitch. It's dangerous. It's reckless. That's a red card. It's even a red card in Scotland, which you need to sometimes actually kill somebody to get a red card in Scotland. But it's even a red card in Scotland. Lager Bielka's Cameron Carter-Vickers doesn't get in that fight and just uses his frame to let that ball go back to Joe Hart.
Yeah.
Awata done it about 10 minutes after he came on as well. He just got his body in front and they couldn't get round him. He added that wee bit of physicality. The boy bought the penalty kick.
100%.
His two bookings, you can argue the second booking, right, but it's a penalty. It's the letter of the law. But even his first one was due to inexperience. He gave the ball away and panicked and committed a foul that he didn't actually need to commit in the first half. And that put him under pressure. He was going to play an hour with a yellow card. And again, that's what led to the sending off as well, that inexperience. He played a bad ball. They won it, broke forward, and he was that desperate to make up for his mistake. He gave away a poor free kick that he didn't need to put away. Yeah. He didn't need to give away. Matt O'Reilly didn't need to give away that free kick either. But again, you're hoping that these guys learn from it. They need to learn from it because we've got nothing else. All we've got is hope with that. But I think the second one was harsh. When I saw it even in the replay, I went, he's not getting that as a penalty. I went, that's just a wrestling match. But again, we're not watching Stevie Conroy refereeing a game. We're watching a European referee who's been told football should be a non-contact sport and that shouldn't be happening.
What I would say on that, Kev, talking of decisions and VAR and all the rest of it, how refreshing was it to see the offside VAR graphics? How good was that? Because I don't know if you saw them actually, JP. I don't know if it came up.
This morning,
yeah, and you're looking at it and thinking it's absolutely night and day from what we're getting served in Scottish football, which is amateur hour. You know, it really is. And then you look at that and you think, wow, this is great, because it is the fact that we've just bought the cheapest version of VAR. VAR works, VAR's good, but we've just got a really horrendous version being operated by really horrendous officials. But I wanted to make that point. Again, I've got loads of comments coming in here. Hatate and McGregor, the reason I'm bringing this up from John, Hatate and McGregor way off the pace. I think I would go back to what JP and also John Hughes have said this week. If you've got a three-man midfield and one of them's not pulling their weight, either defensively, as Kev pointed out, or even just in work rate and the yards that they're putting in because of his fitness, it's going to affect the other two guys that are playing alongside them. So I've got a bit of sympathy for McGregor in that respect.
Matt O'Reilly's 7, 6, 7, 8 year younger than McGregor.
Yeah.
So maybe that
That's true. Yep. But by the way, I think even O'Reilly, by the time he came off, he was done. You could see he really was leggy. Roddy McDonald, Hart must take responsibility for the goal too. Double Denim, welcome back. If we are dominating domestically year on year, then we must invest to, one, sustain that, and two, build to the next milestone, which is to be competitive in Europe. I've got a wee thing to throw out there, see what you think. But, you know, Terence, Pat, we are open to any type of kind of question. Who is the best boxer from all the... See what you've started, Kev, from all the Acsom contributors.
Jerry Taylor.
Probably. Obviously, like a lot of kind of wee housing estates and villages and all that, boxing was a big thing where I grew up. But obviously, I was far more suited to playing football, so it would not be me, JP. I don't know if you've ever done the boxing training, a wee bit of the boxing.
No. 7 asides is as far I go. But on Hart, okay, yeah, it bounces before it gets to them. Does Gigi Buffon in his pomp get that goal, get that save? Perhaps. There's no guarantee that he would. I don't think that you can count that Joe Hart. I don't think you can file that next to his mistake against Leipzig, put it that way. No. It's not of that level. And I didn't think he did too badly throughout the game. Had to deal with an awful lot of passbacks from Liam Scales. Liam Scales didn't turn into danger, which I'm glad about, but there was an awful lot of, he was put under pressure quite a lot. Obviously, the argument that I was speaking to Paul from Celtic Fans TV, I met him and Callum in the ground afterwards, and he was saying, "Oh, could they got it out quicker?" And yeah, of course, I think that's definitely a truth.
The thing with Joe, I think that the game, the circumstances around it, the chaotic nature of the second half, that free kick just before half time, you tend to forget Joe Hart's on a good run of form at the moment, and he saved a penalty. And like you said, JP, he was involved throughout that game. The onslaught when. I mean, I was watching the game, Kev, and I'm thinking to myself, I actually turned into wee James and said, I say wee James, he's bigger than me, young James, and said, what is the limit? Because I remember like 4 guys getting sent. Did 4 Hearts players not get sent off against Rangers one? Because you're watching 9v11 and you think it's unwinnable. You can't even compete with 2 guys down, can you? You just cannot compete, and it's damage limitation. And a big part of that was Joe Hart for me, I thought.
Did Rangers no win a League Cup final against St Mirren with 9
St Mirren, they did, aye. They did. It was 1-0. But I mean, St Mirren are a wee bit different for final.
I think Gus McPherson was a St Mirren manager.
Big John Potter, the captain that day, ex-Celtic, John Potter.
So.
But, you know, Joe Hart, let's not forget Joe Hart's form up to the game, Kev. And, you know, over the piece, yeah, you could maybe debate the goal, etc. But I do think that he played the real leader's part. I felt that Rodgers using him, taking him into the final press conference and all that was part of that. We needed our leaders. I think Joe Hart came out of that far more positively than otherwise.
He's made a good start to the season. I mean, the save against Dundee at 0-0 as well at the weekend was up there with the save against the double save that he made against St Johnstone when it was 0-0. You look on Wednesday night, he had the one that he tipped over the bar in the first half was probably the only save that he had. He then saves a penalty. Then just after that, he has a save with his feet. He wasn't overly worked for all the dominance that they had. That was maybe something to do with their shooting or something like that, but he wasn't overly worked. But he will be. He is disappointed. He will be disappointed with the. And he is disappointed he's came out. He will be disappointed with the free kick. He must say, he has came out and says it was a mistake. He came out and went like, I should have done better with myself. It took a wee skid that I didn't expect. But you'd have still wanted him to be a bit better there. But he's kept us in a couple of games this season. That's what he's there. Keepers make a mistake, they lose a goal. He'll save us more time than he will cost us this season. And as I've said plenty of times on this, the only reason I wanted another goalkeeper brung in is because he's in the last year of his contract, and I didn't think he'll sign another one.
And he needs challenged. He needs challenged. You know, Greg Taylor needs challenged. I think Hugo needs challenged. There's certain areas of that park where
What did well when he came on.
He did, but I was talking yesterday, JP. I thought, you know, that role that Hatate had. We've got players that could have played that better. You know, that high pressing role. You've seen him. He was right down the 2 central defenders and the goalie constantly. We've got players. Kyogo does that role better, and he's got the engine, and he can run all night, and he's fit. That's why I found that quite a strange decision. You've already mentioned Turnbull not getting picked. What did you make of the team selection, JP? Because obviously the other one that you could probably talk about was the right wing role, Lilo Bada being injured. Yang's been playing in there, and we threw in Palmer. What did you make of that?
I mean, Lewis Palmer is an unknown quantity to us at this moment in time. Still, I don't think I've seen anything from him to be making me think that he should be dismissing everybody else in terms of the first team jersey. I think it's a big ask to ask somebody to come in like that and make their first start. I didn't have a problem with it because I thought, right, guy's an international. He's had a good international week with his team. He's up to speed. You'd think with playing 90 minutes. The rest of the team was as I'd kind of hoped. I did want Hatate to start. I'm not saying that I think Turnbull, just because we've got the benefit of hindsight, but I'm only saying that if Turnbull had started, there would have been a complete meltdown. But Hatate playing as we know he can and properly match fit is a different prospect in that game. But I think there's other elements at play there. And Brendan Rodgers has alluded to it himself. He said, we'll have Rayo back, and he's looking to knuckle down and get back to playing, and sort of almost sort of saying, if I'm translating that the way I hear it, it's the transfer window's closed. He knows he's not going to get a transfer right now, so he can only play football. But it takes a certain type of person and a certain type of character to to really put that to the back of your mind. Some people can do it and some people can't. And I would question whether or not he has actually done that, because I just didn't see it. You know, that's the biggest stage you can play on, Tuesday night. That's the biggest stage you can play on as a footballer. And I wouldn't be telling the manager that I'm ready to play if I didn't feel that I was ready to give 100% in that game. And surely there's discussions. It's not just a case that you're playing and then the player's got no choice. Like, they'll obviously have done tests and everything to make sure that he's ready to play.
And in match as well, JP, like Gavin Strachan, in match knows through the body technology that they use during a game, when someone is at that point, we need to take them off now. So what was it, 57 minutes, I think he lasted there. So it's happening in match as well, isn't it?
It is. And, you know, I'm no expert in football, never claimed to be, but I could tell that the guy was absolutely miles off it. And whether that's miles off it football-wise or miles off it mentally, I don't know. I think it's a combination of the two.
There was a brilliant argument raging on through the Acsom chat, and when you're not involved in it, Kev, you do exactly what Kev Graham's doing now. You just sit back and laugh about Rio Atati. Now, David Crines, Scales was the reason Hart wasn't overworked. The reason I'm bringing this up, David, good point, is, you know, at the beginning of the season, if you think, right, we've brought in Rochs, we've brought in Lagerbielke, Kev, we've got Stephen Welsh signing get a new deal. We've got Carter Vickers, who's the number one pick. Where was Scales? Was he fifth choice, do you think?
Fifth, would have been.
Fifth choice? So above, or maybe on a par with Kobayashi. He certainly wasn't a shining kind of option at that point. We've then brought in Phillips, and we know what can play there. Where is he now? Because I would go back to the performance at Ibrox, man of the match. Plays well against Dundee, played well against Feyenoord. Don't think he played that well against St Johnstone in the second half. Played okay in the first half. Where is he now in the pecking order once everybody's fit?
Second choice left back to Greg Taylor, pushing Greg Taylor for the left back role.
A few people have said it. A few people have said it.
I'm not being funny, but he reminds me of Big Lustig. And the way Rodgers played the last time, one full back went, and it was always Tierney, right enough. Tierney was fabulous for Real Sociedad last night. Absolutely brilliant for Real Sociedad.
Gave Romano his jersey. You see that for Romano?
Oh, is that right?
He was absolutely fantastic. Love the wee fella. I'm glad that he's with a decent club and doing well. So when the first time we were here, it was always Tierney, it was bombing, and Lustig would take the step inside and become a back three. I can maybe see that happening again. Again.
That's a good point.
Because I think Scales has probably played his way into maybe a new deal, and maybe like because of his versatility, can go to left back. And Rodgers and Celtic might be looking, he might save us a bit of money because he can do the job that I want a full back to do.
It's a good point. Who would be doing most of the bombing? Liam Scales or Alistair Johnson? Johnson. You see them getting into some great positions against Dundee at the weekend as well. What about yourself, JP? Sorry,
it was quite funny. I was watching the game on RTE, and Ray Houghton was a co-commentator, and he was saying, first thing he says was, that Alistair Johnson likes a tackle. He's a wee bit of a warrior, eh? He is that way. He reminds me of you.
They love it. I wish Ray Houghton played with Celtic. I really do. Castle Milk Boy as well. What about yourself, JP? What have the performances of Scales done for his standing, if you like, in terms of the centre-half positions? Very, gradually we're going to start getting centre-halves coming back into the side. Where does Scales feature for you?
Oh, he's undroppable at the moment. I love a redemption arc within the Celtic squad. I've never ever been anti Liam Scales. You can look back every minute of this and see what I've said about him whenever we've spoken about him, which has not been a lot because we've never had a reason to really speak about him, have we? He's not played. But as soon as I saw him getting played in the pre-season, and Brendan Rodgers spoke about him after one of the friendlies, I can't remember what it was. Brendan Rodgers liking you as a player is normally a good indication of you being a good player. Funny that, because Brendan Rodgers is a pretty good manager who has experience of making players better who he takes on when he arrives at a club, as he did with Scott Brown, Callum McGregor, Kieran Tierney. There's others from that season 1 under Brendan Rodgers first time round. So that to me was a kind of right. Okay, he fancies him. He's willing to put his trust in him as a player. Game on. I'm happy with that, and I'm so happy for him, because the guy's been out on loan at Aberdeen. Probably thought that was his next destination. The rumours were that there was a deal already in place, and then lo and behold, injuries and fate intervenes, and sometimes fate is what makes a Celtic player's career. I'm not saying he's going to go on and become a 500 appearance legend or anything like that, but he could, like Kev says, he could be playing himself into a new deal. And see, where we're speaking Ireland, I need to remember and say this. On the way out to the game on the train, all the trains were supposed to have been cancelled, and suddenly all the Celtic fans were like walking off in different directions and heading to walk to the ground, which is an hour's walk, by the way. So I was like, I'm not doing that. And I just asked a Feyenoord fan, I was like, trains really cancelled? And the guy was like, no. I was like, there's a train on platform 8 to Dordrecht that stops at the stadium. And I was like, all right, cool. I just went down with him and jumped on a train that was pretty quiet. And there was an older guy sitting with a green flat cap on and a green jacket. And he had like a badge on the flat cap and the jacket. And it was I could tell it was a Celtic supporters club of some sort. And he was with 2 young girls. I think one was his granddaughter and her pal. And I just thought, I was just looking at him and I was like, you've seen a lot. You're a Celtic fan. You're away in Feyenoord, you're away in Rotterdam, and you've seen a lot. And I was like, I bet he was at the 1970 final. Bet you any money he was there. And on the way back, it was obviously thousands of folk all piling onto like 2 trains. And I got into a carriage in the distance. Like, the last carriage is always empty and everyone's piled onto the first ones. So I get in there and I get a fold down seat, and it starts getting busier. And the guy comes onto the train with his granddaughter and the pal, and I'm like, no. And I was like, straight away, just stood up and went, that's for you, sir. And I gave him my seat, and he went, oh, God bless you, son, God bless you. And he sat down, and I saw the back. He was sitting right next to me, and I saw the badge, and it was Donegal Celtic Supporters Association. And I just said to him, I was like, sorry to ask, but I was like, and I don't mean to be rude, but were you there in Milan in 1970? When effing right I was. And I was like, wow. Wow. And I just thought his name is Tony McIntyre from Donegal. Told him my first trip to Ireland was to Fanad in Donegal, and he knew it well. And I told him about the pub next to the lighthouse, and he was like, oh yeah, I know that and all that. It was just amazing to speak to somebody. Like, you talk about people that have been to Celtic games for decades.
I know.
50 years. 53.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I love hearing that kind of stuff, JP.
Yeah.
I really do. I was talking to a guy, Shug, from the Dundee Travel Celtic Supporters Club a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me he was at all 3 European finals. And, seeing 10, 15, 20 years, there's going to be very few, if any, who could actually say that, Celtic fans. And it's incredible, like you say, the knowledge and the stories and the anecdotes all these people have got.
I got like 5 minutes with the guy. It was a 5-minute train journey, and it was. I wish I could sat and spoke to him for ages, because it would be brilliant to hear. I mean, imagine his tales of travels. He's been going home and away for all that time, and it's amazing.
It is. It's incredible. Listen, we've pulled a few positives. We've had a few disagreements. That's what it's all about on a Celtic State of Mind. Thanks 1,000 of you strong on this Thursday afternoon. We could stay on. There's 1,000 people just now watching this show. We could stay on for hours, but there's a few other wee bits Kevin, JP and yous, I'm pretty sure, have to do as well. So thank you all for getting involved. We'll be back tomorrow as well. All that's left for me to say, JP Mason, Kevin Graham, thank you for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers.
Cheers, Paul.